Welcome everybody to Work in Process, our Process Therapy Institute podcast. I'm Dmitry Vulfovich, and today we have a special guest named Lane Arye, and he is a process therapist. And I tell us more about yourself.
More about myself. I'm a white guy.
I didn't know
um,
that.
well, you never know. I'm I'm a cis guy. I'm a straight guy. I'm a therapist. I do a lot of work with individuals and couples and groups and communities and organizations and yeah.
And tell me about your work, particularly process work,
Work.
because
Mhm.
we because this is the Process Therapy Institute podcast, and it's really interesting to find out where how similar or different your work is. And yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me, Dmitry.
Yeah,
And
me too.
yeah, so process work was developed and is being developed by Arnold Mindell and his wife Amy Mindell. And Arnie used to be uh, first he was a physicist, and then he was studied and practiced Jungian psychology over in Zurich, and was a trainer at the Jung Institute, and then started to work with uh, not just the dreams of people, but also their body experiences. He had a lot of clients for some reason who had serious body symptoms, and he noticed that what was happening in the body mirrored what was happening in their dreams. So he developed this whole thing called dream body work and started writing a bunch of books. He's written a bunch of books by now, and so yeah, so how to notice what's happening in the dreaming process, not just in your dreams, so that Jung said that we're always dreaming, right? Jung said he said so many different things, but Jung said that a dream is a compensation for our one-sidedness.
Hmm.
Right? We're one-sided in this direction, so the dream balances or compensates our one-sidedness by showing us something else.
Yeah.
And so Arnie noticed that it's not just in the dreams where that happens, but the body is doing the same thing. And then later that got uh, expanded to the way that we communicate, the words that we choose are the what's happening in my throat right now. I'm like that for some reason, and there's like in that, so that is a dream happening in the moment. We could explore that, but we don't have to. Um, but yeah, so noticing how the dream is happening in the moment, that's a key question in
Mm.
process work. So it could be in the body, it could be in your movements, it could be in relationship with the therapist, relationship between couples. It can be happening in groups and in organizations, and yeah. So
I
there's a
love that. I
yeah.
love that. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a dream the other day where I was my dad, and I was looking down at myself as a younger boy, and telling him that myself as my dad, that somehow, like, oh, you're so precious, and I wish I want to be there for you, because my dad wasn't there for me as much, perhaps, and I was younger. But I had this deep grief that I was crying, and I was in my dream. And then when I woke up, it actually felt like I really did cry. I had the same type of relief that one would have after crying.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say that there's a compensation. It's almost like that was real. That was something that was a process that was happening in me that I wasn't connected to as much in my
Mm.
waking world, but I did connect to some deep grief.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. There's a deep grief and also a love and appreciation for yourself, for that younger self, that younger self didn't feel.
Right, right. It was like
Yeah.
a therapy session.
That's great. I love that. I love that. I love when I used to be in therapy with Arnie on a weekly basis back in the 80s when I moved to Zurich to study process work.
Wow.
And, uh, and then sometimes I would dream that I was having a session with Arnie, and I would wake up and I was like, ah, I got an extra session. Nice. It was really, and that one I didn't have to pay for. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But can I just say something about your dream to illustrate something
Why
about
not?
process
Yeah,
work?
yeah. Why not?
So, so there's different parts of that dream, right? There's the father who's loving that kid, and then there's who's you, and then there's the child in the dream, who's being loved and receiving that love. And so in process work, we talk about that we notice in our experience or in our client's experience which part of the experience are we more identified with, which one is more intentional, which one is are we more aware of,
Hmm.
and which one do we have more agency about, and then which part of that experience is less intentional, that we don't identify with. That's not me. That we're not the agent of that. We're the victim of that, right? We have less awareness of that, and we notice those two sides of any process, and 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 so this side we call the primary process, the one that we have more awareness, agency, identity, intention. And this we call the secondary process, that there's less of those things. And we notice, so like this one part gets the microphone more often. One part is really known well, and this is kind of the up and coming part.
Hmm.
Um, so in your dream, I mean, it seems from your dream you've worked on yourself a lot. It seems from your dream because you're that's both Dmitry, the little one, but also you're identified with the father there. So, but that father's grief is maybe new. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's what you're saying, sort of the secondary signal or something, or the secondary process, the father, perhaps.
I don't know because this is why I think that you've worked on yourself a lot, because it starts to get a little uh, with let's say somebody who hasn't worked on themselves that much, or in a lot of different processes. Even if somebody has, it's very it's much more clear. I mean, I could ask you about that, but this is not, I'm not working with you. But which is more, which do you identify with more, that little kid who feels kind of unloved and unseen, who needs that father's attention, or that one who's like really able to look down and really love yourself?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think you're right. I think that's definitely something that I've been working on, and looking at my own kids, I think I felt that even the prospect of not being there for them has triggered some kind of deep sadness of me not being there for or have not my parents not being there for me in some way, or missed moments or something, or missed
Mm-hmm.
missed situations. Yeah, so there's like that. I think that there is a newness in the sense that I'm identifying with this more ideal father.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm curious in process work because I'm familiar a little bit with it, and I'm kind of cross-referencing, how we do it with process therapy. But um, when you say primary and secondary process, is it the same thing as primary and secondary signal, right? Or is that different?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by primary and secondary signal.
Like when a person is like talking, like let's say if I'm talking about my father, and then as I'm doing that, I am like petting my chest. So there's could be like my idea, right? My concept of how I think about my father, and then there's some kind of other somatic or other process or happening that I'm not in touch with, or something. That's what you're talking about, right?
That's right. So when you do you use the word primary and secondary signals in your work?
Not particularly, but I've kind of not started to, as I've read Arnold Mendel's work, I've kind of seen that. I've started to use or kind of borrow it from it. I know that they use it in other like somatic and Hakomi. There's kind of cross reference in other
Right.
places
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've definitely, yeah, something to that degree, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's right. What you're talking about is that anytime um, we're communicating one thing. We're communicating the thing that we intend to communicate. That would be our primary communication. But then we're also communicating other kinds of things. So we call that a double signal, right? I'm saying, oh yes, my father didn't love me, but there's the love right there, like you're saying.
Hmm.
Um, so oh yes, there's something there. It is right there.
Right.
Um, and so we would call that the secondary signal.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
Right.
Um, or in working with a relationship, and somebody says, "Yeah, I'm really interested in you." That's a double signal.
Oh yeah,
And
they're looking away, right?
yeah, right. They're like, "Yeah, I'm really interested in you," and like, well, what's going on up there? And what's super important with those double signals is to not just interpret that, right? Because the normal thing to is is to think, oh well, he's not really interested in the other person, right? Because you're saying you are, but you're not. But instead to inquire
Right.
about that, what happens when you look up there and right? Maybe you're seeing something, maybe you're imagining something, maybe you're connecting with yourself deeply in order to connect with the other person.
Right.
So not to interpret, but to inquire
Right.
about
Yeah.
that other signal.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of how we work too with the process model is that um we would say keep doing that. Like keep looking away, but do it on purpose so that you can kind of explore. I have this analogy that I made up recently with my students that I kind of like. It's like when you go when your car has issues and you go take it to the mechanic. What does the mechanic first do?
Investigates,
How?
runs your credit card first of all, but um,
Definitely. After that.
looks under the hood,
But okay, but all right, they look under the hood.
asks you asks you what's going on. I don't know. I'm obviously not a good mechanic.
Okay, I'll just give it away. They take it for a drive.
Right, there we go.
And when they take it for a drive, they're listening. Uh, they're allowing it to operate as it normally would, but they're listening to any clinking or banging or rubbing or any something that doesn't sound right, right, or off. And so in some ways, the analogy is that like you kind of have to keep doing what you're doing in order to kind of fully assess, because otherwise you tell them stop doing that.
Right.
Like I'm people pleasing. No, don't
Mhm.
people please. But it's
Right.
almost like I could say, okay, no, let's keep people pleasing,
Mhm.
or try people pleasing me right now, and notice on purpose what that experience. Inquire, like you said, inquire into the experience instead of telling it to stop, because then you can't learn anything from it.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that. It sounds like our work is very similar.
Right.
Yeah, remember I was saying that the more primary stuff, the more known stuff is also what we intend to do, right? And the other stuff is the stuff that we don't intend to do and we're not aware of. We don't have much awareness of that. So if somebody's doing a double signal, they probably don't really notice it, and they're certainly not intending it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but and often if you notice it, oh, I notice you're looking away, right? Oh, you know, the signals are like kind of shy animals. They get startled quickly and they want to run away. But like you're saying, oh yeah, like an inviting, curious attitude. Yeah, keep doing that and find out. So what happens there, from the way I think of it in the moment, is there's something that's unintentional where I don't have any awareness about it. If I make it intentional, then I get more awareness
Mm-hmm.
about it. And then I know more what that signal is trying to communicate.
Right.
And then it gets even cooler because then there's another unintentional signal, and then oh, we can make that, and now this is more my primary process, and something else happens, and that's how you deepen a process and really unfold it.
Mm.
Arnie used to say to me when I was a student at Zurich, he used to say, take a signal and take it all the way to heaven. Like go all the way with it. Don't just stop at that first thing.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like expanding. It's like, yeah, expanding consciousness, allowing, inviting more awareness. That's so cool. Yeah, and there's also an element to that, from what I understand from your work, and we have the same philosophy, is like the sort of non-duality, right? So that there's like no, it's not a good or bad thing, or any feeling or emotion. Is sort of like that kind of Taoist yin and yang, right? So there's like a um, at any point, if you go into the darkness, there might be some light inside, like at the other little dot that's there.
That's
so
right.
so you kind of allow the deepening to go wherever it needs to go.
That's really
Right.
right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that includes, yeah. So I was working with somebody recently who was yeah, feeling really low energy and really upset that her excitement about life and her sense of wasn't there. Uh, and I encouraged her to go more into her low energy and to know, not to go into it more, just to notice it, right? In process work, one thing that we do is amplify. We make things bigger,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Which
like it,
mhm.
yeah. It's like if there's a song on the radio, and you're not sure, oh, what is that song? And you turn it up so that you can really hear the details of it. Oh, that's that song. Yeah, I like that, right? So that's like an amplifying thing, like on an amplifier. But sometimes instead of amplifying the signal, so sometimes we amplify the signal itself, right? Like look there more, or oh, I noticed something happening with your hand. Make that happen even more, right? That's an amplification. But sometimes amplification is just amplify your awareness of it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Just notice that more. So I asked her to notice more of how she notices that low energy, and she said, but I want the high energy, and it's not here, and I'm so mad it's not here. I said, well, how do you notice the low energy? right? So that I want the high energy, that's the primary process. But here's this thing I don't like, that's secondary.
Hmm.
Um, and so,
And it's not even the high energy, it's the wanting of the high energy that's the process, right? The
r-
wanting itself.
right,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, yeah, 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 exactly. This is the way it should be,
Right, right.
right? And we would call, I don't know, I'm getting into all kinds of details here, but we would call that the belief system on the edge. So between the primary process and the secondary process is an edge.
Hmm.
And there's a belief system on that edge. And the edge functions to keep us in the primary process. We can't get over the edge into our wholeness. Remember, Jung was saying that the dream is a compensation for our one sidedness. The dream is trying to help us be whole,
Hmm.
right? But she couldn't find more about her wholeness because she didn't like that low energy.
The belief, right? Yeah, we have an interest. We have a similar edging thing, but I'm wondering maybe we can compare and contrast
Yeah,
that
please.
more.
I'm fascinated. Go on.
Uh, yeah, I mean, from what I understand, when you say belief, it's almost like an identity scaffolding, right? Because oh, if I didn't have this, what would that say about me, or what would I be without this thing, or without this? So it's almost like yeah, the edge is like this stepping into a certain level of discomfort that that expands beyond the threshold of my comfort zone. And when you say belief, is that do you mean like an ego, like an identity belief, like about yourself?
I mean like a belief system, like high energy is good,
Right, right,
low energy is bad. I should always be heading in a certain direction.
right. If okay, right. So that yeah, that's I think that confirms. It sounds like what I'm similar to what I'm saying. So it's almost like the identity is that oh, if I'm in low energy, that says something about me, and that's not good. I should
Yeah,
be a low energy person or something, right?
yeah, but there can be all kinds of beliefs.
Uh huh.
Um, but that so for instance, if somebody um, you know, I always have to be nice,
Mm-hmm.
or people should be nice,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. And then
Oh, right,
there's
and that limits me from like this anger that I have that I
that's right,
right, right,
that's
right,
right.
right.
And then there are edge figures. There's the people who or society that we have internalized that taught us those messages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So to cross the edge, you have to let go of that belief and then experientially try on this secondary signal or allow it to experience itself. Right.
Right, or work with the belief and the belief system and the edge figure
Uh huh.
until you realize, oh, maybe that's not to my benefit.
That's right. You have to kind of meet it. Sometimes linger at the edge or
Right,
experiment with the edge.
right,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
So with this woman, just to go back and finish that story, um, she ended up feeling the what she was calling low energy, and she said it felt like heaviness, and that heaviness was. Uh, I said, just notice that heaviness. Where do you notice it? And what do you notice about it? And she said, it's like pulling me down. And I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't want to be pulled down. I want to go and I want to, right? But pulling you down, yeah, let's just imagine, feel it and imagine that you're being pulled all the way down. Where would you be pulled down to? Down to the ground, down to under. And she imagined it was like pulling her all the way down to the ground, to the earth. And she felt this massive earth beneath her,
Mm-hmm.
and felt so supported by that, surprisingly, right? So that went against the idea that the only way to be whatever is to have that energy.
Right. 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 Yeah. And
Anyway,
that was an experiential reality versus the conceptual reality that she was believing in, right?
yeah, Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. That's beautiful. And that's, yeah, that happens time and time again, doesn't it?
Time and time again. That's right. That's right. That's right.
um, yeah, that reminds me of it. That kind of a, we had this email back and forth about like religions and stuff, and that kind of reminds me of that. In some ways, I'm deeply inspired by Buddhism and Taoism too, and particularly in Zen, and you know, they talk about that, like, you know, the experience, direct experience is often different from the concept of
Yeah.
what you think. And I think that's a big problem, I think, in mental health, and that I think maybe more therapists should buy into this idea that, like, when a client says, oh, I'm anxious or I'm depressed, that's only an idea, a certain kind of social and colloquial like thing that they can look up online. Oh, anxiety, it has a certain connotation of, like, you know, illness or something. And but very little is there room to be like, okay, well, let's explore the anxiety right now. And
Right.
there's a cascade of you know, sensations and imagery and subtle things, and that are like unbeknownst unless you actually stay with it. And so that the direct experience of that, it's almost like, why even, it's almost like it's better not to call it anxiety and just and feel it out before calling it, because then you already stamp it. It's almost like, I don't even want to know what it is because I already know what it is. I've already stamped it. It's anxiety. Right? Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love what you're saying, yeah, and when if somebody says that's why I said what she was calling low energy.
Right, right, right.
And I said, okay, just notice this thing that you are calling low energy. How do you notice it in your body? Right? So yes, how do you experience that is a question that I ask numerous times a day. How do you actually experience that? That's right. I love what you're saying. That's yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm also deeply inspired by Buddhism and Taoism and what we're talking about when you said, oh yes, that reminds us of what we were talking about. Of course, and just to say, you know, as we were talking about online also, you know, I'm not a Taoist. I'm not a Buddhist. I meditate regularly, but you know, I'm not a Taoist, and so I'm going to now tell a Taoist story that I love, but honoring that tradition that I'm not part of. Um, so yeah, there's a story from Chuang Tzu, and he there's an old man who is by the side of a river, and Confucius, who is the both the fool and the foil of many Taoist tales, uh, is there watching this scene with his disciples, and Confucius sees him apparently fall into the river, and Confucius says, quick, 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 go save him, go save him, that river has so many whirlpools, he's going to surely die, quick, quick, go save him. And they run down the river and they find him sunning himself on a rock, and they bring him to the master, and Confucius says, how did you survive that river? There's so many whirlpools, and it's impossible. How did you possibly fight against the pull? And the old man laughs and he says, I've been swimming in this river since I was a boy. And are you crazy? If you try to fight against the whirlpools, then you'll surely die. But I just let them bring me to the bottom, and then they spit me back up.
Mm.
And that's that same kind of moving to its opposite that you were talking about. That don't fight against something, let it really take you down. Find what's in it, find the gold that's there, and then come back to the surface with it. Like this woman's sense of being held by this immense solid earth.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. That's a beautiful story. Love that. That makes perfect sense. Um, yeah, and I love the whole that's a paradoxical nature of life. You know, one of my clients was recently telling me about how he has trouble talking to his wife because they often argue, and then he said, "Oh, but my son had to go to the hospital because of some kind of like whatever. Oh, they need to go to the emergency room," and he says, "Oh, we were forced to be together for 5 hours in the waiting room, and we had the most amazing, productive conversation together, and we got a lot of relationship stuff um, underway." And he said that it wouldn't have not have ordinarily happened in that way, and he was like, I didn't like that we were there, but come to think of it, that was really good that
Great.
And I thought, wow, what a natural example of this. That not everything is as you would think it would be. Everything has sort of a paradoxical nature to it,
Yeah.
and maybe a much more prevalent and primordial kind of reality that there is that you can't. There's nothing you can do about it. It's always there, and there's always some kind of hidden positive intent in things, and that you can work towards being more allowing, and use it to nurture and benefit yourself with it, right?
So nice to hear you say all that. Yeah. Love it. I love how you said there's a hidden positive intent in things. That
Yeah.
there's a wisdom to what is happening. We
Hmm.
say in process work, there's a wisdom to what is happening, and in the problem is the seed of its own solution. So he didn't want to be stuck with his wife because they're not getting along. So that was a problem to be stuck with her for 5 hours. But wait a minute, that was the solution.
Right. Right. Yeah. The problem is the solution.
Right. That's right. But you have to also for this woman, right? That low energy she saw as a problem, but actually it was also a solution.
Right. Right.
But like you said, you have to work toward being more open to that, and also somebody with skills like you. I mean, in that situation, your client was able to just notice it himself, but often people need a little bit of help to kind of unfold things in a way so that it becomes more apparent.
Right. Right. Right.
So that's where our tools come in handy.
Yeah. They get to practice that, right?
Right, right. Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah. And even the resistance, so our bottle was founded by Don and Carol Hadlock.
Mhm.
They passed away recently, but yeah. And then one of the most amazing quotes that Don said, and I don't know if he created it, but certainly he said it. But the quote is, "No resistance to even resistance itself," um, because
Yes, love
that
it.
makes sense. No resistance.
Absolutely, yes.
It sounds like a Jedi thing to say or something, No resistance to even resistance itself. Because as soon as you make as soon as there's exclusions to it, then it doesn't. Then it becomes not the real, not the real flow.
Yes. Well, I mean, this it sounds like, yeah, he and Arnie, or they and Arnie, had very similar ideas, because Arnie has often said, say yes to everything, including to saying no.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Right. Yeah, because we can easily come to, I guess, favor or become biased towards flow, or say that, oh no, you have to allow, and that's what you have to do. That's
Right.
what you should do, right? And that becomes its own kind of restriction or something, you know?
Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, if somebody is really kind of tight, right, and that's their primary process, right, and rule bound and stuff, then they need to learn to flow. But if somebody's like always flowing, then the dream is going to show them something to compensate that. That's going to, I mean, it reminds me of me actually, because when I was, I wrote a book called Unintentional Music.
Oh,
Uh, I'm a musician and I did a lot of work uh, with musicians and wrote my master's thesis and my doctoral dissertation on using process work to work with music and musicians and
wow, that's interesting.
non-musicians and stuff. And so I wrote a book about that um, and when I sent it to the publisher sent it back and said, okay, we need a few more chapters. So I was like, what do I write chapters about? And one of them that I realized I was working on myself, and it's called Unintentional Music because, right, I was saying, right, that primary process is what we're intending. And then so what happens when we're playing music, right? We're intending to play a certain way.
Hmm.
And then something else happens, right? And we're like, oh, let me practice so that that other thing doesn't happen. But maybe that other thing is trying to help our creativity even more, and we can also learn from it about our own personal development.
Hmm.
So I was working on myself, and I realized, oh, the whole book is about following the unintentional. Well, I guess I really don't like the intentional very much. So I wrote a whole chapter about what's good about the intentional. And
Ah,
I learned so much about what's good about the intentional, and it transformed my music. So those,
wow.
that's
That's
an
very
example of
zen,
one of
huh?
those things. Say it again.
That's very zen, or paradoxical. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
as soon as you claim one thing, then the other thing the other side pops up and says, "No, wait a minute," you know.
Right. Right. Or Jung said enantiodromia. That's a fancy Greek word for moving to its opposite. That's that thing that you're saying when you go into the yang, there's the yin. When you go into the yin, there's the yang.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and so it's like, yeah, I love that's so beautiful. Like, it's like you really can't really claim anything, um, any one thing, because it's so many things. It can be the moment can turn into so many things, and you can be so many things. So you can't really claim one thing, or good is good and bad is bad.
Right, right, right. Yeah. I mean, it makes me think about groups too, because in process work we also do a lot of work with groups and conflict situations and working with world issues and stuff like that. I don't know if that's kosher to bring that in
Why
here
not?
as well.
Oh,
Uh,
well, if it's not kosher, we could play with non-kosher too.
okay, okay. Um, so it just reminds me of I I co-led a 5 year project working in the Balkans with Serbs and Croats and Muslims after the war
Mm,
in the Balkans,
wow.
and our very very first time there in Croatia. Uh, I won't go into the whole story, but there were we had Serbs and Croats and Bosnian Muslims, and it was the first time that they had met, and to talk about ethnic tension and stuff like that, and or he had even met since the war had started, and everybody was kind of nervous. But then when my co-facilitator Arlene Odergon and I were trying to, you know, work on this stuff, it's like, well, we were invited here to talk about to work on ethnic tension, and because that's what the NGO wanted us to work on.
Hmm.
and they said, well, no, we don't have any ethnic tension here. We love each other. It's like, well, you guys just had a war. And they said, yeah, 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 that was those people there. That was those people who started that war. You know, they didn't trust each other, but we're all humanitarians. They were all from different humanitarian organizations. We are all humanitarians. We're not like those people, right?
Hmm.
Which is beautiful. Thank goodness not everybody's like those people who started the war, right? Right now we're in the middle of a month into war in Ukraine,
Right.
right? So it's potent in the moment. Uh, but we could say that the whole group there said, we are this, we are not that. The whole group had a primary process of we love each other. We are not like those people who don't trust each other, right? They started the war. So this is more secondary.
Hmm.
But it took a while. We were there for 4 days, and on day 3 of our 4 days, um, one woman had the courage to say, very timidly, I feel a little bit more comfortable with the people from my ethnic group. And then somebody from another ethnic group said, I knew I couldn't trust you. And then the whole thing blew up.
Hmm. Wow.
And we worked with that, and there was like really heavy heat going back and forth. Well, I don't, because we, the facilitator, said, why don't you trust? It's like look more in that direction, right? Why don't you trust her? Because her people did this to my people. Oh yeah, well your people did this to my people, and everybody was talking about what was done to them by somebody else.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
as a result, nobody was listening to each other. But my facilitator and I were listening and saying, we hear you, and wow, this, and we hear you, and this. And then finally, through that kind of modeling, they started to hear each other a little bit. And I won't go into all the details, but the people started to cry about not just their own stories, but each other's stories.
Mm.
And then that night, instead of everybody going back to their rooms with their own ethnic groups, as had been happening, suddenly like 10 bottles of wine appeared and a guitar. And we were all having a party together. And at one point, everybody was singing like old songs, because 10 years before that, they all lived in the same country and they all knew each other's songs. And then at one point, we're like drinking wine, uh, and and suddenly there was a hush, and I like a song was being played, and it was like really like everybody was singing but very quietly, and I asked the translator, what's happening? And she whispered, this is an old song that everybody loves, but it's a Serbian song, and it was forbidden in Croatia, and we were in Croatia,
Mm.
but everybody was singing it together, and it just makes me want to cry to remember that moment.
Wow.
And so, long story short, the reason we were talking about this was about this enantiodromia, or that the seed of the solution is in the problem. We are this, we are not those ones who don't trust.
Oh, yeah, pointing the thing, yeah, pointing out there, right? External.
Yes, out there. But when that came up, I don't trust you, I don't trust you either, then that could start a process where there was the real love. They were professing love, but then the real love came, the real unity came.
Wow, so beautiful. They had to work through those layers, huh?
And we were there for 6 years, so we worked through a lot of layers with them.
6 years. Wow.
It's a 6 year project.
What an interesting thing to do. It's beautiful.
I mean, we weren't there for 6 years nonstop, but we did two
Came and back.
two forums a year for 6 years.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It makes me, yeah, that's so beautiful. And it makes me think about like just basic like people in general that like that this like projection, right? Like how profound of a realization that there is such thing as projection, right? That like that the things that we complain about or are not happy with about other people are just like,
Mhm.
pertaining to us in some way, and there's something in it for us,
Yes.
and then the only way to kind of really resolve it is to kind of own it somehow, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm. Right. Yes. It not just resolves it with the other person, but it helps us grow. That in that moment, the other person we're projecting that onto is our dream that is balancing our one sidedness.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it makes me think about now with the war that's going on now and the disinformation and misinformation that is used by both sides, really, by the West, by Russia, and each side thinks the other one is the devil.
Right.
Each side thinks the other one is a threat to existence.
Hmm.
And neither one sees, oh, yes, maybe that's also me.
Yeah. And it makes me think about relationships too, because I noticed that, like, me, like, for instance, me and my wife, she would argue that I'm kind of mean to the kids or something, or that I'm aggressive to the kids, and she would kind of harp down on me. And then one day, we had some issues, and then finally I decided I'm going to stop being mean to my kids. And then I stopped being mean to my kids, and then she started being mean to the kids. And then so it's like, where does the dream? That's the mystery of it too. It's like, where does it end and where does it begin? Where does it come from? Like, where do these impulses come from? And like,
Right.
it's fascinating.
Yes. Well, what you're talking about is something that we would say in process work, that those are roles. The nice to the kids is a role. The mean to the kids is a role, and those are roles in the field.
Uh-huh.
And the field itself is a field. Like, let's think about a field for a moment. We're more into group stuff now, but it's true inside of us too, or in relationships. Um, uh, a field. Let's say there's a magnetic field. I remember when I was in fourth grade, and the teacher made us put a bar magnet with a piece of paper on top of it, and then sprinkle some uh, iron filings on it. And we watched the iron filings fall like this, and they go zoop, like that, right? That's a magnetic field. It polarizes, right? So any field will polarize in certain ways. So that's a polarization. One roll, zoop, that's on the north end, one roll zoop, on the south end of the magnet, right? You switched to the other side, And so your wife had to switch because both roles, in a way, needed to be filled.
Hmm. Hmm. And so, yeah, tell me more about that. What happens? Like, are these roles in a given relationship? Do they have to continue to polarize or experience themselves, or or do they get dissolved eventually, or does there need to be these roles? Or can you elaborate on it a little bit? It's super fascinating.
Well, let's think about it first of all in terms of an individual, right? So uh, we all have our own traumas, right? We all have our own basic thing, right? I don't know about you, but I go to therapy and it's like, why am I working on the same stuff all the time? I've been working on this for the last 45 years. How is that possible that it's the same stuff,
Uh-huh.
right? But it's transformed a lot over time, and I'm no longer as unconscious about it. I'm not any longer I'm not grabbed by it so much, but sometimes when something comes up, it's that comes up. And there's a and we call that a life myth in process work. There's or Jung called it a life myth, and we
Uh-huh.
work with life myth a lot. What is that basic dynamic that we're working on and that we've seen again and again and that we can notice in our childhood dreams and maybe and also in our chronic physical symptoms, and there's a dynamic there. So there I am. I'm sometimes here in the dynamic. I'm sometimes here, right? But that can also, after a while, I can see, oh, right, there's a problem with that. But as we've talked about, is there also gold at the bottom of that? And maybe there's gold on both sides of that rainbow.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not just a problem. It's also there's something potentially valuable on both sides of that rainbow. So, um, so going back to you with this example, so obviously being mean to the kids is not good,
Hmm.
right? That's not going to be helpful for them. Obviously, your wife criticizing you is a little bit like being mean to the kid,
Right. I'm just a kid in that at that from that perspective. Right.
right? So she's saying, "Don't do this thing that I'm doing right now," right? So that's a projection in
Uh-huh.
that moment,
Uh-huh.
right? But is there gold on the kid's side, on the side of the one who's scolded, and is there gold on the scolder? And is there some way to find the beauty, for instance, who knows? I'm just dreaming into this, the vulnerability on this side and openness and an ability to feel pain and maybe compassion. And on this side, something about directness, something about being firm and clear and direct and not just mushy and nice all the time, but right. I don't know what it is in your relationship, but I'm just imagining what's that.
Oh,
So it's a
that's
question.
yeah. You've actually nailed it pretty much. Um, yeah, like I'm learning to be more vulnerable and kind of open, and then she's learning to be like decisive and assertive, and that's kind of her.
Yes, yes. So what makes we say in process work that I was talking about the life myth. There's also often a relationship myth in a relationship that you can sometimes notice in the first interactions and like how people get together. Uh, just like it's in a childhood dream. That's something like the dream of the relationship, how they got together. Um, and 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 often there's different roles in the relationship, right? There's there's the pursuer and the pursued,
Right.
or there's the helper and the helped, or there's right lots of different possible roles in the relationship. And when a relationship is when each partner is stuck in a certain role, that's not as sustainable as when the roles are more fluid between them.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, and it's yeah, and as you were saying, I'm thinking like maybe there's a way to almost transcend those roles or become bigger than them or something, or outgrow them.
Yes. And one way to do that is that I like is to see the roles as spirits in the relationship.
Mm.
See them as spirits rather than this is me, right? But this is a spirit that may come into me, it may come into you. This is a spirit that may come into me, that may, and and uh, we could we could um, we could be social activists with each other. I don't like when you're in that role. Or we could be psychosocial activists. That role is not very helpful. Do you agree? Yeah, I agree. Oh, yeah, maybe we can watch out for that role when it's around. Yeah, maybe we can be on the same team and like have that role not be disturbing us so much. And then another aspect of that is maybe we can find out what might be the gold in the essence, the diamond essence of that role that maybe we can use in our
All
relationship.
right, right. Hmm. I like that. I really like that spirit analogy because it's true. People do get kind of entranced or hijacked by, in the thralls of in this under the spell of this or under the spell of that, under the spell of anger, under the spell of passion, or it's almost like you're kind of taken by the spirit or something.
Right, right, right.
So cool.
Oh, this is such a fun conversation.
Yeah, I feel bad because my two colleagues they wanted to meet you, but I was like, oh, I kind of want to do a one-on-one just to get to know them. But they're
Um,
really excited to meet you too.
oh, cool. I look forward to meeting them too.
Yeah, yeah. Um, does this feel like a good place to stop and kind of
Maybe so, yeah.
yeah. Um, okay, well, thank you so much, and I
Thank
will
you
be
so
posting.
much.
We'll post this on the Facebook page, and I got your bio, um, and I will well, I'll send you the link once we have it up. Um, and I yeah, I guess that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dmitry. Really, it's been a big pleasure. I've really enjoyed.
Mm,
I feel all bubbly and excited. Looking forward to
yay.
bringing this energy to. Oh, my two teenagers are both gone tonight. Oh, I'm gonna go bring it to my wife. We'll go have dinner together. That sounds nice.
Yay. And you're in Oregon, right?
No, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm in the Bay Area.
You're in the Bay Area? Where are you?
Uh, I live in the North Bay, but
Ah,
I work mostly in Berkeley.
okay.
But these days I just work online, so I just work from my home.
You're everywhere. Okay. All right.
All right.
Um,
Really good to meet you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And
okay,
for,
Elaine. Yeah, and let's be in touch about a follow-up episode, huh?
I'm into it.
Okay. All
All
right.
right.
Stay
Thanks so
safe.
much. Bye bye.
Bye.